Hi, Dia. Hi, Mary.
Greetings, 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 Christina. Yay.
And Charlie and Morgan, and don't have your feelings hurt if we're not saying hi to you by name because there are dozens upon dozens of people.
And
But
we are so excited to be in
yeah,
conversation with these
in which
fabulous authors and
case,
all of you.
hey, let's do this. All right. Thank you all to our first ever Fall Books preview. We are so excited about the four titles that we have coming up in September and October of this year. For those of you who missed it the first time around, the 12 of you who are still filtering in, I am still Will Neville Raven, executive editor and co-executive director at Torrey House Press. Here with Kirsten Johanna Allen, who is, along with her spouse, Mark Bailey, Torrey House Press co-founder, and Kirsten is co-executive director with me and is our publisher. And four phenomenal, phenomenal authors, who some of whom we have had the joy to publish before. Others, this fall is a delight to be able to bring a book into the world with them for the first time. And these books run the gamut from feel good fiction at a time when we desperately need it to helping us recontextualize all of the Earth's living creatures, including the ones that may or may not be napping at our feet right now. And two books that sound like they couldn't be more different, but are both really looking how at this need in the American psyche to connect with history and to connect with place and to connect with meaning. And what are the ways that we find that meaning? What are the ways that people try and sell us something else instead? And mostly it's a chance to spend an evening in really, really good company, including each and every one of you. So Kirsten, I'll turn it over to you to give a little bit of background for those of you who may be here because follow a particular author somewhere and are a fan of their work and their writing and might be new to Torrey House Press. Hey, Kirsten, hi, who are we?
Thanks, Will. Good evening, everyone. I am Kirsten Johanna Allen. As Will said, I am co-executive director and publisher and co-founder of Torrey House Press. Torrey House Press, Mark Bailey and I founded it in 2010 because we thought there were some stories that were going unheard, some voices that we weren't hearing from in the literary landscape, certainly at a regional level, but also at a cultural level. Where are these stories about our relationship with the natural world and how important they are today, 16 years ago, and still today? And so we jumped in, not knowing anything about publishing. That's why we started a publishing house. And so we were founded in 2010, published our first books in 2011, got into national distribution in 2012, converted to nonprofit in 2015, which is when I took over as publisher. And then Will joined me 4 years ago, like almost to the day. And in fall of 2022, we became co-executive directors on a co-executive director co-leadership model, to steer the press, and it's been a delight. And pretty soon we're going to have a little change of reins as I step back into an editorial director position, a role I've held since the beginning of time, but leave the publisher title to Will coming up pretty soon. So that's coming up in our future. I'd like to acknowledge that tonight here in Salt Lake City, I am, and Will, who is just a few doors down from me right now, and Eli, who's a couple miles away, we are joining you from the traditional homelands of the Ute, Paiute, Goshute, and Shoshone nations. We invite you to learn more about the Native peoples on whose land you are joining the conversation tonight. And we want to remember that we all live on lands that most of us didn't start with. I am so excited to be in conversation with Betsy Gaines Quammen, Annette McGivney, Pam Houston, and Eli McCann, um, because authors are the best part of publishing. It's just the most fantastic thing to be in conversation. And so we're really glad to have all of you joining us tonight because an author, a book, none of it makes a difference until we're sharing it with other people. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And Will is going to lead us off with kind of our first conversation. What we're just an overview. We've got some questions that we're going to ask our wonderful authors, and then all of you joining us at home, we'll have a time for some Q&A. And then at the very end, Pam's going to read us out. Will.
Great. Yeah, and we'll hear some readings from the other folks along the way. But yeah, this is a chance for us to jump in, learn about these books, none of which are in the world yet, almost, and what kind of things we're going to be looking forward to. I was joking with Kirsten earlier this afternoon that I wish I could hold them up as I was talking about them, but we've had so much demand from booksellers and librarians that we keep having to give away our own copies of all four of the early reader galleys for these titles. So if you still have possession of your own galley, feel free to to show it and share your cover. As we start, we'll just go in publication order,
Woo!
because it is as arbitrary as the alphabet. So Betsy, let's start with you. September 1st launches spooky season. And please tell us about your upcoming book. Where did the idea come from, and kind of how did this one come to be? And so your book is This Haunted Land: Reckoning with Ghosts and the Stories That Shape America, coming on September 1st.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm so excited to be. This is my third book from Torrey House Press. I adore Torrey House Press, and this is thrilling. I saw that there was a dog lover. We have some dog lovers here. I have 4 dogs in the house right now, so I'm hoping that they behave themselves. I too am a dog lover, and I'm also a ghost lover. I am a historian, and I have written in the past about history and extremism and sort of the foundations of political upheaval, revolt on public land, conspiracy theory, and radicalism in politics today. And I think I really wanted to get away from that. I wanted a break, and I also love ghost stories. I think ghost stories are delightful and interesting and a very cool way to look at the past. I've lived in haunted houses and have had some experiences myself. I actually believe in ghosts, but I also feel like and this I think was a surprise to me. I'm not sure how much I appreciated how this would happen in the process of writing this book, that by collecting ghost stories and looking at American ghosts, and I have stories from Florida, the first fort that was built in this country, it was Spanish, and the stories there in St. Augustine, to stories in Arkansas, the people seeing the ivory-billed woodpecker, and this idea that we're haunted by extinction, we're haunted by violence, we're haunted by extraction. I look at dam building and ghost stories around dam building. I look at Uravan in Colorado, which was it's a buried town, a uranium mining town where there's a man who still hears children laughing. And I started to look at how America was a haunted land. And in part, it's because we haven't come to terms with some of our darkest chapters. I have a story about a haunted Indian boarding school. I have a story about a haunted safe house on the Underground Railroad. And I think that what started out as a book about ghost stories and folklore really became a book about what Americans and white Americans need to reflect upon to reconcile with our past. And so, and I also believe in ghosts and had some ghost encounters while I was writing this book. So would this be the occasion that I would, okay.
This would be a fantastic occasion.
Okay, so
Read to us a little bit about ghosts. Yeah.
So I was a writer in residence at the Hemingway House in Ketchum, where Ernest Hemingway took his life. And I'm going to go. I hope this is about 5 minutes, but so I'd been staying there, and early in my stay, the very kind maintenance manager gave me a tour of the main house. So when you stay as a writer in residence, you're on the bottom floor. There's an apartment, and then upstairs is where Ernest and Mary lived. I headed to the big stone porch and entered the Hemingway's former life. The main floor, with its atomic age furniture, minimalist and clean, think Jetsons, had been artfully arranged. Mounted African antelope trophies hung on near a large picture window that, when the drapes were drawn, looked towards the Wood River Valley. On the second floor, above the kitchen and living room, there was a bathroom equipped with what might be the first bidet in Idaho. In one of the two bedrooms sat a black trunk emblazoned in red, lipstick red paint, Hemingway, evidence of the author's far-flung and sometimes dangerous travels. It was covered with stickers from Italy and Spain and Africa, and it was stored at the foot of a large bed, draped with a down comforter under some type of tawny hide. Nearby, on Mary Hemingway's desk, sat a lamp clock, rotary phone, and crimson-framed reading glasses. An empty chair stood behind, backlit by a sun shaft sneaking through the closed, cream-colored curtains. The dwelling's rustic charm and futuristic sophistication felt fitting for a couple as worldly as the Hemingways. But for all the home's nostalgic and noteworthy appeal, there was something unsettling about the place. Whether it was the gloom and all the drapes had been pulled shut, an awareness of the author's suicide, or a strange uneasiness of a home no longer occupied by the living, things just didn't feel right. My 2-week stay started out well. I was writing away on my book, True West, and feeling proudly productive, but the house tour left me shaken. From the studio apartment, I began to hear movement upstairs. I would also occasionally, out of the corner of my eye, catch a glimpse of something stirring, though I was alone. I was jumpy. On the third evening on my retreat, I walked outside to see the Idaho sky go pink with the sun sinking behind broad gray mountains. When I came back inside, I closed the door behind me. It had two heavy-duty locking mechanisms, a deadbolt and a latch. Before I could throw the bolt, the door blew violently open. Okay, that's a yikes, I thought. Hello? Hi? Oh God, was this Hemingway's ghost? So thanks for letting me stay here. It's great. I've read a lot of your books, and the apartment was silent, but I heard the ghost-like conversation, so I kept going. A Movable Feast. That's my favorite book. That's my favorite book. Actually, I don't remember what I said. I sounded a bit shrill. I do love A Movable Feast, but I was worried that if it was the ghost of Hemingway, he'd somehow know I didn't love all his work. I liked Old Man in the Sea. I read it in 7th grade. For whom the bell tolls and the sun also rises, I picked up somewhere over the years. I actually didn't finish Big Two-Hearted Rivers because I lost interest. Could he know this? Anyway, the room was quiet, and I started getting ready for bed, and I put on my pajamas, and I got under the covers, and all of a sudden someone grabbed me by my shoulders. The whole room went white with pastel lights, and I somehow managed to sort of sleep that night. The next day, I moved into a hotel for 2 days. So I told this story to a wonderful older man in Butte, Montana, when I was telling him about the book. And he was an archivist at the Butte Archives, and he was so mad at me. He said, "You had Hemingway's ghost come visit you and you moved out for 2 days?" And I said, "Oh my God, I was scared." And he said, "No, no, 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 no. If you have a ghost visit you, you listen to that ghost." And so that's what this book became an exercise in, listening to ghosts. So That's my story.
Love, love, love.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll return to that, and I mean we'll have a open conversation among everybody. There was a lot of rightful giggling. And speaking of giggles, Eli, you have written what is perhaps a somewhat fun read, I hear. Um,
Thank God. Thank God you've heard that.
I have. No, the word on the street is that it's pretty fun. It's breezy, it's great, and that one of the things that we spend a lot of time with manuscripts on the multi-year journey to the page, and um, we knew that there were going to be laugh out loud moments in this, having read your other work, and the jokes still hit on the third or fourth read, and as Kirsten was saying, as she was copy editing it still brought her to tears in a couple of places. So I think it's going to be really, really tremendous as more and more people get the chance to read your debut novel, Stitched. This is a story for those of you who follow Eli on TikTok or Instagram. You may have heard there, but if not, you're in for a treat. So where did Stitched come from? How did this book come to be? You've done a lot of other writing, a lot of other kinds of writing, but this is the first time you've done fiction.
Yeah, I never thought I would write a novel. I never wanted to. That just didn't seem that interesting to me. And so I've always written humor essays about my life. I write a humor column for our newspaper here in Salt Lake City, and so I've done that sort of writing quite a lot over the years. But Stitched is a love letter to my mother and her friends. And it came about because in 2021, my husband Skylar and I were at dinner with my parents, and my mom just suddenly, out of nowhere, told us there is a lot of drama going on in the quilting community right now. And my mom is a quilter. She's been in this quilting group for like 40 plus years. And I knew that, I kind of grew up under a quilting frame. There was always a quilt set up in our house being worked on. But I'd never heard about the drama in the quilting community. And so we started asking her a lot of questions. And for about the next 2 hours at dinner, my mom just dished all of this like really terrific gossip about quilting communities across the world. And this group doesn't get along with that group, and this group cheated at a competition and they got banned. It was just all this stuff. And it genuinely, truly was interesting to us. I mean, we were asking her just follow-up question after follow-up question. It was funny, but it was interesting. And when we left dinner, we went and got into the car, and Skylar, my husband, as soon as like the car door shut, turned to me and he said, "You have to write a book about this." And I said, I'm not going to write a book about quilting. Like I'm not a quilter. I don't know anything about quilting. And he said, no, 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 no. You need to write a fiction novel about quilting, about a group of quilters. And I told him I don't want to write a novel. I have no interest in doing that. And so he said, well, just think about it. Let's think about it. And so we drove home, and we ended up staying up really late, just sort of plotting out like what would a story even look like if I was going to write a book. And we ended up coming up with this general story idea about what if I wrote a book about older women who had been quilting together for many, many years, decades, and they're preparing for a competition against their bitter rivals, like a bitter rival group that they've just hated for years. And their numbers are dwindling, and so they have to recruit a couple of younger gay men to come and join them and teach them how to quilt. And I thought that's a really fun story. And I remember even saying to him that night, well, I hope somebody writes that book because I would read that book. And he was like, well, you could be the one that writes that book. And I said, I don't want to, I'm not interested. And so a couple of months went by, and the story just kind of kept percolating in my head, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to sit down and like write a chapter and see like how that even feels. But I'm not going to write the whole book. Like I'll just write a chapter of it. And so I sat down and I wrote this first chapter, and I handed it to Skylar and I said, read this and see if you think it's even funny at all. And so he took it into another room so he could read in critical silence, and came back in after he read it, and he had like literally had tears in his eyes, and he said, Eli, this made me laugh out loud and it made me cry twice, and you have to finish this book. You have to finish it. And so I was like, okay, again, I'd never written a novel. I was like, I'm not totally sure how to do this. But for the next year, with my mom's permission, started going to her quilting group. It's called Common Threads. And I would sit with these women and just kind of watch how they interact and ask them questions about quilting. And I slowly worked on this manuscript. And to kind of your point, what you were saying earlier, it was I set out to write a humor book, but it ended up being a lot more. I would say like more serious than I have had ever intended. I really wanted to write a book that didn't make fun of women or make fun of quilters. I wanted to write a book that honored them and that was funny because they were funny. And so as I kind of developed that story and built it out and was writing about them, um, it just sort of naturally felt like it was important for me to write about them as real, genuine people with real, genuine problems in their lives. And so that just sort of came out of me, and I'm really, really proud of how it has turned out.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a book that is as funny as you wanted it to be going in, and it has so much more heart than it has any right to for somebody who was trying to just write the humorous version of this story at the very, very beginning of that journey. And you really found some gorgeous stuff. So two quick questions. One, how insufferably smug is your husband feeling now that people are very, very interested in this book that he bullied you into writing?
Oh, he is so validated, and now now that we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of excitement about this book, and he is now saying, "So you're a novelist now? That's what you do? Is you write novels?" And I'm like, maybe. We'll see."
Awesome. And then my second question, can we hear part of that opening chapter?
Yes, I would love to share. So, this is an excerpt from the end of the opening chapter. And the way the book begins is this sort of central character of this quilting group, who's the leader of the quilting group. Her name is Betty Lou. She has just sent an email out to the other women in her group to let them know that the big competition that they do every other year is going to be coming to Utah for the first time ever, and that they've announced the theme. And so she's all excited and they're ready to go, and they have 1 year to make this quilt. The storage room in Betty Lou's house was in the basement, just as in the rest of the homogeneous row of homes on the Ogden street on which she and Marvin had lived since their son Matthew was only 4. They had built the 2-story split-level house nearly 30 years before, with the kind of builder who gave buyers very little design choice and few options. Bargain builder, her friend Nadine had called it. Great for when you need to build a home cheap. Nadine hadn't meant to hurt Betty Lou's feelings, but she had done so anyway. No one would have known. Betty Lou smiled through it and made sure everyone understood she had picked the color for the main bathroom. Soft peach, it was called. It's quite popular right now, and the builder told me it wasn't an option, but I just insisted, she had told her friends. Betty Lou would cover that soft peach bathroom in coral-themed decorations. The wallpaper was printed with ocean fish, and a tasteful mermaid nightlight was plugged into an outlet just next to the light switch by the door. It automatically turns on when you shut off the overhead light, Betty Lou would point out to any guest who agreed to a tour. Just gives the room a nice feel, you know what I mean? And Matthew loves it. Comes in here just to stare at it about 20 times a day. I think he has a crush on the mermaid. The mermaid nightlight would burn out some 10 years later. Betty Lou would never bother to remove it. Sure, she'd get around to finding a replacement bulb if she could just remember to bring the old one with her to Hags, the local hardware craft bedding store. The burned out nightlight was on a long list of things Betty Lou needed to replace in the house, an overwhelming list for a couple with significant financial struggles that had only grown worse since Marvin was forced into early retirement due to severe migraines his doctor could never seem to explain. Betty Lou had taken a day job at the local grocery store to try to make up for the loss in income. In Betty Lou's house, every penny was accounted for, and too many were double booked. Betty Lou flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs before remembering that it, like the mermaid nightlight, had burned out. The bulb was hard to reach without the precarious placement of a ladder in the middle of a set of stairs leading to the basement. Betty Lou had forbidden Marvin from attempting to switch it out when they first noticed the need 2 months before. "You're not 50 anymore," she had sniped at Marvin, who was retreating to the garage to replace the ladder he had just brought into the house and started erecting on the staircase. "I'll call Matthew and have him come and do it." Marvin told Betty Lou on several occasions he resented their reliance on their son, the only of their children who still lived in the area, for these kinds of tasks. He complained that it seemed such a waste that by the time he retired and had time for the projects around the house he had neglected for nearly 3 decades, his body and his spouse started conspiring against him. Still, he didn't mind having a new excuse to ask Matthew to come to the house for a visit. Betty Lou pulled out her cell phone to use as a makeshift flashlight and began slowly stepping down the stairs, leaning on each with only her right foot, due to some recent hip pain that wasn't dissipating, no matter how many giant fish oil capsules she had begun to consume every morning. The fish oil capsules were a recommendation from her favorite national AM daily radio show, Advice with Dr. Clarkston. She didn't approve of Clarkston's pervasive profanity, but she appreciated that each episode ended with a non sequitur call for all to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, which Betty Lou figured canceled out all the dams and asses. When she stepped off the bottom stair, Betty Lou turned and opened the door to her long storage room. A cord that had been pushed by the opening of the door swung back to her face, where she caught and pulled it to turn on the space's one dim light. The room was not large, maybe 6 feet by 10 feet. 3 walls were covered with shelving, which Marvin had installed only months after the family moved into the house. Dusty Ball brand jars full of liquids in muted colors covered every shelf surface. Canned peach slices, applesauce, salsa, prunes, some with sloppy labels that read 2010. Betty Lou had preserved all this food over the years with every intention of rotating out her food storage supply, consistent with the directive she had received from Mormon church leaders when she began raising her children decades earlier. This was easier to keep up with when her children were still small, but once the last had moved away, it all seemed so silly to open a quart of strawberry jam just for herself and Marvin, especially since Marvin was allergic to strawberries. Betty Lou carefully stepped over a few bulging cardboard boxes labeled Christmas. Tousled garlands poked through the tops of them, one catching Betty Lou's nightgown. "For heaven's sake," she muttered as she shook her hem free. "This year we are finally going to go through all this Indeed junk," she swore without conviction, the way she had so many times before. Betty Lou couldn't help but notice it was becoming more and more difficult each year to crawl through the storage room to retrieve Christmas decorations or other supplies. She had increased the length of her morning walks through the neighborhood and had been living on rice cakes for months, but that didn't seem to keep her from going up a size or two. Betty Lou had always been short and plump. Big-boned, her mother had called her since a very young age. But once she turned 60, just 5 years ago, it was like her metabolism had ground to an absolute halt. She tried to turn her attention onto the parts of her looks she felt she could control, like her hair, which she kept somewhat short and which she dyed dark brown on a regular basis. Betty Lou usually wore lumpy cardigans and sweater vests adorned with kitschy trinkets. She wasn't known among her family and friends as a fashionista, but these same family and friends would routinely tell Betty Lou they loved her style. The way she presented herself felt cozy to those around her, and they wouldn't have wanted her to change a thing. Having made her way to the back of the room, Betty Lou began shifting and stacking boxes until she reached one in the far corner. As she lifted one box, she felt the bottom open and dumped 24 pairs of worn blue jeans onto the concrete floor. Betty Lou had collected these from her extended family members several years back. She had intended to use them to make a jeans quilt, a fad at the time, with her friends. Betty Lou had overestimated the interest of the Ogden Quilters Association that year, led by Lyra Smith. "I'd like to think our skill level and standards are higher than this," Lyra had said, pulling a bejeweled pair of buckle jeans out of one box and wincing. Betty Lou didn't sit next to Lyra during quilting night for the next 3 months, even though they were partnered on a particularly challenging flag-themed piecework project at the time. Betty Lou moved another box and set it on top of the open one that had spilt the jeans, which she decided not to pick up and reorganize. She shuffled 1 or 2 more around, and then right there in the far corner, she found it, the box she had gone to the basement to locate. This box's corners were dented. Faded marker across the top read "Kitchen," a callback to their move nearly 3 decades ago. Her fidgeting hands shimmied the box off the shelf, and she plopped it onto the floor, quickly prying open the folded cardboard pieces on top. Bright, colorful fabric lay folded neatly. Betty Lou had purchased it when her children were young, intending to make each of them puff quilts for their bedrooms. "I found just the happiest fabric. Should really brighten up their beds," she had told Marvin, who fumbled through the new purchase, nodding. "Good find," he said to Betty Lou before gently squeezing her hand. The fabric was placed in a box a year later and then forgotten. Betty Lou shuffled through the box, her eyes misting as the contents reminded her of a time when her children were being potty trained. She never thought she'd miss having one of her kids crap his pants. Picking up a piece of folded red fabric, Betty Lou smiled. There she stood amid the mess in her dim storage room with one light bulb in an ever so gentle sway near the door. She shivered a bit in her nightgown, drafty, although she never remembered that until she was down in the basement. She breathed in deeply and ran her fingers over the soft cotton. "It's perfect."
Thank you.
Love.
And to be clear, you're not a total dilettante in the world of crafting. It's just that quilting doesn't happen to be your craft of choice, correct?
I'm a
How do you
knitter.
spend your time? Okay.
I'm a knitter. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
So different though. So different.
Yeah.
To judgmental quilters, absolutely. Great. We're gonna have our one hard turn in terms of topic and tone here as we go over to Annette McGivney. And Annette, Plastic Shaman, the true story of a deadly self-help retreat and America's misguided quest for wellness. This is a book that is centered on an incident that took place in 2009. It's been something you've been thinking about and working on for a very, very long time. How did you tell us a little bit about the story and how did you first encounter it and when did you decide that there was a book here?
Yeah, sure. Well, and first of all, thank you to Torrey House Press for publishing Plastic Shaman, and I'm so honored to be with these other awesome authors. So, yeah, I just could not be happier about how this 8-year long quest has turned out for me. But as far as kind of the story behind this book, as I've been a journalist for more than 30 years, and would be a terrible like breaking news journalist. Like I can't turn around anything quickly. But I love to mull over things and find the stories that other journalists have missed because they were working so quickly or they weren't looking deep enough. And so I love to dig deep into topics, especially ones that were maybe of national significance. But all the other journalists kind of went away and felt like the story was over. And that's sort of like where I like to step in and see what I can find. And so the story behind Plastic Shaman is that I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona in 2009, 2008, when actually it was in 2009 when this James Arthur Ray, a nationally known self-help guru, led a retreat that cost $10,000 a person. So it was a very expensive retreat where a lot of lawyers and engineers and doctors and professionals attended. And he led a fake Native American sweat lodge. He said he'd been trained by a Lakota medicine man, and that was a lie. Along with most of what he shared with his followers was a lie. He was like an expert con man. And he held a sweat lodge retreat in Sedona, Arizona. And for people who have been to Sedona, they know it's sort of kind of a new age capital full of crystals and lots of woo woo, and also very much has this sort of Disneyland atmosphere around Native American culture. Not an authentic portrayal of Native American culture. You won't see very many actual Native Americans in Sedona, but you'll see a lot of posers. And so in Flagstaff has always kind of like laughed at Sedona, thinking, all this new age stuff was a joke. But then when this sweat lodge happened, it was of interest, and I followed the news, and then James Arthur Ray went to trial, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He got out in 2011, and did 2 years of parole. And then he went right back into business. And so by 2014, no one was paying attention to what James Arthur Ray was doing except me, I think, in terms of the journalism world. And I thought, this is so crazy that this guy has been able to go back into business. And also, that like no one seemed to be accountable like for what happened. And so I thought, what if I could get the files from the criminal investigation that happened into James Arthur Ray? And so, fortunately, because of my journalism track record and my relationships with law enforcement, I was able, through a Freedom of Information Act request, they turned over all their investigation files, literally thousands of files. And so I just started going through them and I thought, wow, this is an amazing true crime story that I could offer so much reporting on that hasn't been shared yet. And so that was my original vision for the book. And then I thought, obviously I need to get in touch with the families of the victims. And there were three people that died. I was able to contact all of them. Two of them had not spoken to anyone with the media before. When the actual tragedy happened in 2009, they didn't want to, the families didn't want to talk to the media. They just wanted privacy. So, but fortunately, by the time I came around, when I started working on this in 2018 pretty aggressively, they were open to talking to me. So that was important. So at the time in 2018, I thought, okay, I have this awesome true crime book, like offering more information about James Arthur Ray, kind of what's going on in Sedona and all these like fake posers, offering fake Native American sweat lodges and other appropriation of Native American spirituality. But then I got to know through another story assignment I was writing for The Guardian some Native Americans on the Yavapai Apache Reservation, who are the indigenous people of the Sedona area. I got to know these Native Americans who had protested against James Arthur Ray and had been fighting before and since to protect their spirituality and their indigenous culture that was being exploited by, these self-help and wellness gurus who were claiming to have been trained by medicine men or, were Native American themselves. And so I did a pretty big, like my investigation spread into cultural appropriation around that and telling the story not only of the families of the victims and Ray, the con man, but also the story of the indigenous people of the United States and the appropriation of their culture by the wellness industry. But then I started asking bigger questions about, well, why? Why? What is the draw to Native American culture? And why do I, Annette McGivney, like to have Hopi kachinas in my house and like Navajo sand paintings and Native American jewelry? What's behind this draw to Native culture? I don't see any Native Americans walking around in like, Irish kilts or, appropriating like European things. I've never seen that in my life living in the Southwest for 40 years. And so I started looking into that longing, like the actual psychology and cultural habits and history behind the actual, like the story of the United States and how that has morphed into this myth that we tell. And that is where my book and Betsy's book intersect, is these myths that we tell about ourselves as white people, descendants of European colonizers, and about the country with the American dream, which is actually, we have not faced the real stories around the stealing indigenous homelands, dispossessing them of their culture and their spirituality, while simultaneously allowing people to profit from that spirituality by selling fake ceremonies and other things. I just like since the book has gone to press, I've just lately, the last couple of days, have been looking into AI is now creating fake Native American medicine people. And if you Google that, there's like fake AI medicine people selling fake ceremonies online. So it never stops. It just keeps morphing. So it turned into a book that I thought was just going to be kind of a tidy true crime investigation by me as a journalist, morphed into this much larger project that where I ask questions about our identity as white people, including myself and my own draws to wellness and Native American culture and what's that about and how can I be a better relative to Indigenous people and their homelands and hopefully encourage others to be that as well. So that's it in a nutshell, Will.
Yeah, I mean it's a miraculous tightrope that you end up walking. I mean the entire book reads like a thriller. The number of people that we sent it out to for blurbs early on in the process, and people were just like, I was up until 3. Like people are so mad that they can't put this book down, and rightly so. Um, And it's also, yeah, this expansive exploration of the psychology of longing. And I think it is something Kevin Fidarko talked about in, in his blurb for the book. But just the vulnerability that you bring to like being that bridge so that no one reading it is going to feel like they are being accused, because there is something that so many people have found helpful and healing, um, in various parts of the wellness industry. And also it's built on extractive capitalism, right? And, as Annette and I were talking about this at various times, right? It's this idea that like we're all so desperate to feel like our lives matter and like we have a connection that matters to the world. And in America, the idea that you could just go outside and sit down and be connected to the world isn't good enough. But if somebody sells it to me, then that makes it real, right? And so what does that look like? And um, seeing these connections in new ways, just from the order of things. I mean, Eli's book is as much about the search for and the longing and the unexpected finding of found family and friendships, and that self-discovery happens for all of us in different ways. And Pam's book is very much about finding answers, and finding answers by looking to the creatures with whom we share this planet. And Pam, animals taught me everything. Pam Houston taught me everything about animals, teaching her everything, which I love. Where this is a book of essays, but it fully reads as a book as well as a really complete reading experience. A couple of these pieces you'd published elsewhere, but kind of where did this come from for you, and what have you been thinking about and living through as as you've been turning to the creatures in your life? Oh,
There I go. These all books sound so great. I'm so excited about the fall, and just thank you to Torrey House. Um, I guess I would say I was thinking about how to answer that question because the essays are various, and some of them are about animals I have loved in my own home, and some of them are about wild animals. But I guess like three things came together for me to allow me to write this book. It is true that I have always spoken to animals since I was a little girl in a very abusive home. And it is also true that animals have spoken back. And I thought that was a thing that I needed to keep not exactly secret. I mean, animals in one way or another have spoken in all of my books, but you could always read it as, me being an artist, or, me being me intuitively interpreting, what they might have been saying to me. Like you could read it as an active imagination. But that's not how it is for me. How it is for me is they really speak to me, and I speak back to them out loud. I always have. And so it was the combination of um discovering Icelandic horses, and I was suffering from long COVID for about a year. I lost a year of my life, and a very good acupuncturist in Santa Fe said, I want you to go home today and find a reason to live because your kidneys are failing and you're in big trouble. And I went home and I booked a 7-day ride across the Icelandic highlands on Icelandic horses with 75 loose horses coming along. I booked it 6 months hence because I figured I'd either be dead or I'd be better. And that was the beginning of this love affair with Icelandic horses, who brought me back to life after thinking my life and my identity as a kind of Energizer bunny was over. And the Icelandic horses pulled me back from that and gave me such joy. The other thing was teaching for now 16 years at the Institute of American Indian Arts, where you don't have to explain anything about how you talk to animals and animals talk back. the deep-seated indigenous belief that all beings are sentient is something I have felt and lived in all my life. And then finding Torrey House Press is number 3, where I am received as I am, exactly. And that has been this huge gift of my later publishing life. I am not trying to fit somebody's idea of who I should be. I am me, and my work is received. So those 3 things came together to make this book, which is kind of in a way like the book that I was always trying to write in a way, if I had felt allowed to, kind of. And the last essay in it, which is by far the longest essay, is called A Horse Will Not Make a Suicide, which was my working title of the book, though I knew it would never stick because it's not a book that ought to have the word suicide in its title. But I was allowed to keep that title as the last essay. And that comes from a 6-day ride I did in a valley called Thorsmork in Iceland, where we had an old Icelandic guide, not old, probably 3 years older than me, and a guy, a well-ridden guy named Samuel as our guide. And he was very, very worried about the rivers that we had to cross. Icelandic horses are famous river crossers. They're brave, they're small in stature, they're so sturdy. And he told us that any of the river crossings on the trip might turn us around, especially the last one. And we got up to the very last river crossing, all of us. This is 15 riders and 50 loose horses, okay? There we are at the edge of this raging river, which is, at this angle, it was like a cascade, and a torrent. It was not what you think of when you say the word river. And he lined us all up and he said, "Stay with your horse at any cost. A horse will not make a suicide." And I thought, that's my book. Like, I have a book when he said that sentence. And then he plunged in on his big gelding, and we plunged in after him. And then the loose horses plunged in after us, and we crossed that river, and we were all on the other side. And, the horses stumbled. We were up to above the saddle in water, and we all came out the other side, and nobody made a suicide. And so then I just thought, like, that's the motto. That's the motto for my life now. And so, like, in a way, if I were to sum up the book and the reason why that was my working title, it's just about all the ways that animals have rescued me from the brink of despair all my life. And also, much more than that, shown me the value of working hard, shown me joy, shown me ecstatic release, shown me loyalty, shown me unconditional love, all the things we always say. But this idea of valuing life without having to think about it, that's a gift that animals give us all the time. And so that is the spirit of the whole book, even though it's just the last very long essay that is titled that and is in particular about riding these Icelandic horses, though they appear several other times in the book.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I was, so delighted to work with Pam as developmental editor on this book. And, I always remember our conversation when we're, going, I've done a thoughtful read, and we're kind of going through some of my feedback chapter by chapter. And we come to this last chapter, and I have a little bit here and a little bit there. And I remember you just said, "So you're good with this like 60-page chapter about these horses?" I was like, I've never been to Iceland. I think horses are fine. I don't really care about horses that much. And I just couldn't wait to see what happened every single day as you would get on these horses. and go through these extraordinary experiences that brought that landscape to me and brought your relationship with these animals to me. And I just, I'm so excited to share it with the world. Speaking of animals, Will pointed out, gosh, people are going to be able to see this thing on your arm. So, this is me. I got in a cat fight, as in there was a cat fight, and I got in it. Um, so I have like punctures. My son's cat went after one of my cats, and some things like that. I'm still glad to be a cat person, and yet, I do have some wounds, but
There's a lot of smug dog people on this call, Kirsten.
cats and dogs, cats and dogs. I just wanted to chime in a little bit about how Annette and Betsy and Eli and Pam, each of you are bringing such important pieces of work to the Torrey House Press list. One of the things that we have often done is we we are publishing sometimes special projects from as previously published writers that other presses just won't do, just don't care about. And for us, like Animals That Taught Me Everything is just like that is so what we want. We so want to hear Pam Houston talk about animals and how animals have saved her life. And Annette, with your longtime journalistic experience, to have you bring plastic shaman to us. Investigative journalism is something that we've always been interested in. And Eli, fiction is my heart. It's it is the first three titles that Torrey House published were all fiction. We publish, a larger percentage of nonfiction than fiction right now, but it's just such a delight to have stitched on our list. And Betsy, this is our third book together, and gosh, what a delight! I first found Betsy. I was more on Facebook than I am. I'm like not on Facebook, but I was on Facebook because I was on everything. And Betsy had posted a poster of her dissertation defense about, Clive and Bundy and public lands and Mormonism. And I'm like, well, we got to talk. And it's been, it's each of you brings something really important to the Torrey House Press list. And it's a total delight. I think as we're diving into these four books, we're gonna end with a little something from Pam in a bit. But Annette, I would just love for you to give us a little snippet to give us a sense of Plastic Shaman. One of the things I love so much about your book is that while we know the overall circumstance that these people died after going to a fake Native American sweat lodge, you take us through the story in such a compelling way with so many of the getting deep into the different characters and the impact overall on especially local Native American communities, but even beyond Lakota communities too. You really bring a lot of what Torrey House Press really wants to, the kinds of stories that we want to share with the world in this true crime investigation. Annette, have you got a little something that you'd like to read to us?
Yes. So thank you, Kirsten. And yeah, and so as I mentioned before, this is a true crime story about this crazy con man that killed three people in a fake Native American sweat lodge. But I started asking larger questions about, why would they have believed that he knew what he was doing? And also, why was I not so uninformed about authentic indigenous culture and history? And it's something I didn't learn about in school. And so in this book, I get into sort of the myth behind Native Americans that we are told in this country versus the authentic history and experience of Native Americans. And so This chapter is chapter 5, and just this little bit here is um, I get back into sort of how this origin story of the myths around indigenous people and our non-native relationships with indigenous people in this country. And so this chapter is sort of goes back to what shaped the mythology around this, and it's called Conspicuous Consumption. Long before selling indigenous spirituality became a lucrative business, many United States citizens got their first exposure to Native Americans at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Women toting parasols and men in their best Sunday suits stared at exhibits featuring living subjects in what was described by one anthropologist as ethnological zoos. The Native Americans on display had been recruited from reservations hundreds or thousands of miles away. The exposition, also called the Chicago World's Fair, drew 27 million people during its 6-month run and was timed to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's first voyage to the Americas. The actual anniversary was missed by 1 year due to construction delays. American business and government leaders in charge of the massive event wanted to demonstrate to the world how civilized, ingenious, and wealthy the United States had become in a little over a century since the country's founding. Just as importantly, they were determined to prove that whatever violence had occurred during 400 years of nation building was now a closed chapter, a relic of the past. Speeches delivered on the exposition's opening day proclaimed that the future of the United States was as bright as the fully electric fairgrounds, named the White City for how it glistened at night. As proof of the advent of this glorious industrial era, fairgoers were introduced to new inventions at every turn: electric light bulbs, the automatic dishwasher, metal zippers, carbonated soda, moving pictures, Aunt Jemima's self-rising pancake mix, the Ferris wheel, along with countless other innovations that were marketed to a growing population of consumers. Amid the fair's many exhibits was a, quote, real Indian village directed by anthropologists from Harvard University's Peabody Museum. Native Americans representing 12 different tribes were hired to camp for weeks next to the fair's anthropological building. Donning traditional dress supplied by the museum, tribal members were instructed to simply go about their daily activities. They slept in teepees and brush shelters called wickiups, even though many likely lived in shacks on the reservation. Curious attendees stood at the edge of the campground and watched descendants of the continent's first inhabitants carry out mundane tasks such as cooking, eating, cleaning, and caring for their children. The, quote, live ethnographic performances also included traditional dances and songs that had been outlawed by the federal government and would have caused indigenous people to be arrested under different circumstances. Once spectators moved through the village, they were funneled into a wood frame building that was a replica of the Indian boarding schools during that period. Begun in 1879, the federal program would count more than 60,000 resident students by 1925, representing nearly 83% of school-aged Native American children, many of whom were forcibly taken from their homes. The stated goal of the assimilation program that forbade children from speaking their native language was to kill the Indian, save the man. Observers squeezed into the exhibit's fake classroom, populated with some 30 Native American children from surrounding government and church-run schools. Dressed in military-style uniforms, the girls had their hair pulled back in tight buns, while the boys' hair was cropped short to conform to European norms of the day. As observers looked on, the students performed their schoolwork, or at least pretended to. The girls sat stone-faced at sewing machines making dresses. The boys demonstrated their carpentry skills and hammered leather to make shoes and horse harnesses. Beyond the educational facade, the exhibits fed a manufactured narrative that was taking root in America about indigenous people. false stereotypes depicting Native people as simplistically tied to nature would eventually become so ingrained to popular culture that they would one day, among many other negative consequences, lead non-natives to be conned by plastic shamans. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Annette. Oh my goodness. It is just going to be so fantastic to share this book and Stitched and This Haunted Land and Animals Taught Me Everything with the world this fall. We are so excited. We are so excited. I want to just chat for just a moment about community. Tonight, all of us on screen or off, we are participating in a moment of community together where we're talking about books and ideas, sharing things from across the country, maybe across the world. When Mark Bailey and I started Torrey House Press, starting a publishing house far from the industry's centers of gravity, we had some challenges ahead of us. And I knew that Torrey House Press was going to need to be, and we have been very intentional about building community with booksellers, with conservation organizations, with arts and culture organizations, with readers, and most importantly, with our authors. The best part of publishing is the people, for sure. Each of you is joining us with a little different perspective as a Torrey House Press author, and I wonder if you would share a little bit about your experience. What is it? Eli, you are brand new to us. Annette, you've published before, but you haven't published with us. And Pam and Betsy, we're doing repeat three, each of you. Yeah, three books together. Tell us a little bit about what it is to be part of the Torrey House Press author community. Betsy, maybe let's start with you.
Yeah, I don't have experience with any other publishing company, so I which is great because I feel like I'm in my home. I love the fact that this community, this family is so devoted to authors. There's such care in the way that the manuscripts are read and treated and developed. I love the fact that Torrey House Press has such a beautiful relationship with independent bookstores throughout the region, and libraries, and I love that it elevates diverse voices. I feel like that's so important, especially right now, that it's really important for the most diverse voices to have platforms to tell their stories. And yeah, it's been wonderful. And I'm the care with which the authors are treated, with which the stories are treated, and with which the relationships with other authors and bookstores, libraries, and readers is just tremendous. It just feels like the right place to be, and I'm enormously grateful.
It's so fun. Pam, you're muted.
Maybe I go next because I do have this is my third Torrey House book, and I do have the experience of the other world. I feel like I'm in the second half of my publishing life, and in the first half I was in New York. You all, I mean, you all on the panel have heard me say this before, but um, for me, the values of Torrey House echo almost exactly my values. Voices for the Land is not just a tagline for me. It's it's what I there's a dog. It's what I believe in. And I think when I first started publishing in New York, there was a little more idealism and a little less um, uh, capitalism, maybe, or at least that was my impression as a young person. But to me, Torrey House raises money so they can make the work. And in New York, they kind of make the work so they can make the money. And to me, that's just night and day. And of course, there are advantages. There are career advantages about publishing with a big house, with a big publicity team and lots of money to spend on publicity. There is no doubt of that. But I personally just didn't want to have the kinds of conversations I was having anymore there. And the main thing is what I said before. At Torrey House, my work is received with a generosity of spirit and an excitement. I'm going to tell on you, Will. So Will was my copy editor. It's not like Torrey House has a massive array of humans working there. So everybody wears like 7 hats. So Will was my copy editor for this book. And in one of the essays where I'm talking about possibly retiring from teaching, because my horse Raj is teaching me that, I said, well, who knows if I had some time, maybe I would write this and this and this. And I put down 3 very specific ideas for writing. And Will wrote next to each of them, like, cool, and then yes, and then, oh, please, or something. And I just thought, there it is. Like, there in a nutshell is why I have never looked back from my move to Torrey House Press. That would never happen in New York in a billion years, and who knows if I will write those or if Torrey House will publish them, but it's that spirit that
We'll send you a 3-book contract before you can get off Zoom if you want. So yeah, we
We're ready.
that spirit is worth everything to me, and also Torrey House's commitment, as all the things Betsy said, but also this Voices for the Land. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to make people aware of the beauty that is all around them, that is in such peril.
Yeah.
So much love. So much love. Yeah. Annette and Eli, as new to Torrey House Press, although you each have published before, yeah, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I can go if that's okay. So yeah, I initially, as I described, my process with plastic shaman was evolving, getting bigger and bigger, more ambitious as I ventured into history around Native American culture and the wellness industry and all that. And anyway, so I was working with an agent, a pretty high level literary agent, and I was following the typical path that Pam described of like the big New York publishing houses. And my agent, we developed a proposal, and it encompassed all these things that I have talked about around not only James Arthur Ray and the true crime, but also the social justice history around what is essentially Native American genocide, and also a deep critique of the wellness industry. And so the agents were excited about it. It was pitched to some big, the big publishers in New York, and several of them were interested. Like the editors were like, yeah, this is we're really interested in this. But then the marketing departments, every time I had 3 different meetings, the editors, there was discussion with the editors, but then the marketing departments had to come in, and they were all reluctant, and they were reluctant about books that made people feel uncomfortable, like around, bringing up the uncomfortable, the things that haunt us, as Betsy would say. And so it was sort of expected that I would just tone that part back, that I would rein in the critique of the wellness industry because that happens to be the bread and butter of profit center for a lot of these big publishers, and also the stuff that would make white people who are like number one buyers of books uncomfortable. And so the agent and the publisher just thought that I would do that. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And they were kind of shocked because they were like, you mean you're not doing, aren't you interested in the big advance and the money and the sales and the fame? And I know, like I always, it would be nice to have a big advance. I'm not against big advances, but I wasn't gonna, you know, be promote the deceit that was had been ongoing in our culture for hundreds of years around the way we've treated indigenous people. I didn't want to be part of that, and I wanted to, do right by the truth. And so yeah, so I was pretty discouraged and I backed away. The agent was like, well, if you're, like you don't want to go for a big deal, it's sort of like not worth our while. And so I was like, okay. And I was very discouraged. And then Nicole Walker, who is on this call, who's also a Torrey House Press author. Hello, Nicole. She's amazing. I met with her and we talked about Torrey House, and she's like, you totally should send this to Torrey House. And I was like, okay, I guess. And so I sent it to them, and I was expecting them to be like, well, yeah, we'll take a look at it. But I got an immediate response, and Will and Kirsten were like, we love this. We had to get together right away to talk about it. And the very things that the big publishers were worried about, like the social justice, the history about, the critique of the wellness industry, was what Will and Kirsten were most excited about. And I was I cannot thank you guys enough for that. I mean, it's just like so wonderful to have partners in this effort to, get the truth out there and to try and improve, the way white people approach our history around, indigenous people and basically, the original sins of the United States. So anyway, I'm so grateful. And I, like the rest on this other authors, will never look back. Like I was just so disgusted by the approach of the big publishers. All they cared about was money and putting a round peg in a round hole, like in terms of making sure that it was a true crime book that would have predictably good sales and not, rattle the cage of anyone that, was expecting something predictable. So yeah.
Oh, thanks, Annette. Oddly enough, it is small presses who
Yeah.
take the risks and, follow a mission. And we're
Yeah.
just so thrilled to have Plastic Shaman. Eli, like Annette, you have previously published with another smaller press, and Eli's previous book came out earlier this year from a much loved other Salt Lake City press, Signature Books. But so I know that you've got a wonderful experience with them. Tell us a little bit about what it's been like.
Well, my story is very similar to Annette's, and that like, we basically have the exact same story. And initially, what had happened with me was I finished the manuscript for Stitched, and I had a literary agent who was in New York, terrific person, terrific agent, and she loved the book, and she said, "I need to warn you up front. This is a sexist, ageist, classist industry." And we are going to have an uphill battle because you wrote a book about older women living in Utah. And she said, if that's, if you're prepared for that. And I said that seems crazy to me because why wouldn't people be interested in that? But that sounds like such a fun premise of a book is, these older women living in a place like Utah quilting together. And she said, I'm just warning you. So we start pitching it, sending it to publishers and whatever. And we kept getting the exact same feedback over and over and over again. And it was, this book is so funny. We loved it. We loved the author's voice. Would he be willing to rewrite it and have it be about women in their 30s? And would he write romance into it? And I was like, just kept saying, no, I have no interest in that book at all. And so they would say, okay, well, if he, if he's not interested, maybe send us his next one. And then that would be kind of it over and over again. And this was just seemed completely crazy to me. And it finally we went through this for a year or so, and finally my agent said, Eli, I'm so sorry. I think we're hitting the end of the road here. Why don't you start working on your next book? And I shared that night, my husband came home from work and I was telling him, about this conversation and what she had said. And he said, I'm so sorry, but, maybe start working on your next book then. Maybe this one just wasn't meant to be. And I just remember we were in the kitchen and I just yelled, no. And he said, no, what? And I said, no, I have to get this book into the world. And I said, I know they are wrong. I know I can sell this book. I know it. I know that. And I don't need a big press. I don't need some big, huge marketing team. I know people will be interested in this story. And so it was then that I talked with Torrey House, and Will and Kirsten completely got it, liked the story, were horrified to hear that I had been told to write it down to, the ages down and whatever else. And it's been just a damn delight to work with you all. And these last 2 months have been two of the craziest months of my life as we've been, finalizing the book and responding to inquiries about it and so forth. And the Torrey House team has been incredible to work with. I so appreciate you. You have helped me maintain my sanity through all of this, and I'm very proud of all of us that we stayed true to what the story we wanted it to be. And we're putting out the book that I initially wanted to put out. And I'm really, really proud of that.
We are so glad to be the home. We are so, so glad to be the home.
And I think for all of this work, it's proof that working with, and there are many independent publishers out there, and there are many very, very good ones. And it is certainly, there's a level of money that people get to throw around in New York for advances that is just not a ball game that we're going to get to play in. But you're not sacrificing the ability to reach readers and the ability to make a difference. And, certainly I want every single one of our books to be read by more people who read it. And that is as true for a debut novel as it is for, the fifth book we're doing with Craig Childs. But people are finding books and they're finding authors and they're finding stories because story is what matters. And because the people like Jen and all of the other booksellers and all of the many, many hundreds of librarians who are fighting to keep libraries open all around the country are really good at their jobs. And for us, everything lives and dies not on what percentage of, of our list is wellness books, but it lives and dies by, are we going to be able to explain this book to a bookseller in a way that they know exactly when to put it in somebody's hand? And if we can answer that question, or if we can know that there's going to be a good answer at the end of that, um, it's all worth it. And for the record, though, I do just want to say our marketing director, Scout, was possibly even more on board the moment she read the first couple pages of Plastic Shaman, with she could not get us on Zoom with you fast enough. So, she knows when she's got a good thing to work with too. And, New York is lovely. I lived there. I'm a survivor, and let's make art. So, yeah.
Well, we have a few minutes to invite some questions. If anybody wants to put a question in the chat or in the Q&A before we hear a little bit from Pam to read us out. One of the fun things we have, in addition to independent bookstores and libraries and other kind of weird places that we do events, we're really excited to have Eli's book going to be featured in a lot of quilting stores, and Eli's going to be doing some events at quilting stores. It's going to be so fun. There's just nothing like an intimate conversation. Some of my favorite event memories are during the plague, when Betsy and I did an event in Ridgeway, Colorado, for crying out loud, to a small group in the patio of the Sherbino Hotel, an outdoor space. It was about the same time that Pam and Amy Irvine were doing their apocalypse tour with airmail, where they just had to dodge ash clumps that would fly into them as they drove through so many wildfires in the West. But we had a fantastic event at Boulder Mountain Lodge, one of the first times that airmail got to be in conversation. So we're really excited to be in conversation with you all tonight and the events that are coming up. Valerie Sloan asks, what will touring look like for the 4 authors? There are going to be a lot of events. It's really very exciting. You can take a look at the Torrey House Press events calendar to get a sense of what's coming up this fall. Betsy's and Eli's books both come out in early September, followed by Annette's and Pam's. And there will be events all over the place for all of them. So take a look and see if there's something happening near you. There probably is. I think let's say goodnight. Let's close our wonderful evening out with a reading from Pam Houston's Animals Taught Me Everything.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm going to read just the very last few pages of the book at Betsy's suggestion, and Kirsten's, but I'm going to set it up just by a 1-page reading so you get to know this horse, Oski, how you say it in Icelandic. And just so you get to know him for a page, and then I'll read the very end. Now, this is at the end of a 7-day tour across the Icelandic Highlands with a loose herd. A lot of things have happened in the last 60 pages, as we talked about. Now, sitting atop Oski, waiting for everyone to get situated, the big gelding turns his head all the way around and grabs the toe of my boot with his teeth. "Hey, lady," he says, "what say we ride the shit out of this thing today?" Oski is 6 years old, and this is his first season on long tour. Icelandic horses aren't generally started until 5, and their 5th winter is one of serious training. Oski belongs to Rudmar, Noni's brother, and I've heard he's a favorite of Rudmar's wife. He's approaching his first tour season, like an eager freshman shipped off to a fancy college. "I'm just here to learn and do my best, ma'am." He's getting a little beat up by the older tour-savvy horses when he's loose in the herd, but he's been universally loved by every human who's ridden him. Oski has beautiful gaits, par for the course for a Rudmar-raised gelding. He's strong and sure-footed for a youngster, forward but not too forward, eager to go at exactly the pace I ask for with plenty of energy to spare. And there's something else happening between me and Oski, which can be chalked up to both his age and his nature. He wants with his whole heart for him and me to be spending this day as a team. There exists many a meme claiming a horse can hear a human heartbeat from 4 feet away, followed by a flurry of so-called scientists debunking it. True or not, when I'm sitting on a horse, I can feel his heartbeat and he can feel mine. There are recent scientific studies proving that when humans and horses interact, their 2 heart rates become coherent, which means the frequencies of my heart are lining up with the frequencies of Oski's heart, which may be what produces that utterly addictive feeling of 2 becoming 1. This is another thing any 12-year-old horse girl could verify. If we pause to make a list of things 12-year-old horse girls know about horses that scientists are only now catching up to, we might be here all day. At first, what Oski and my hearts are saying to each other is pretty typical for horse and rider. "Can I trust you? That's great because you can trust me," which elongates into, "Isn't this fun?" And "Yeah, it's so much fun." And then, "If you gave me just a bit more rein, I would not take advantage of it." And If you threw a little flying pace in on the straightaways, it would be perfectly okay with me, which leads naturally into don't worry about those high trail gullies. I will take care of you if you have to drop your stirrups and lift your feet behind you. And you can be certain that no matter what happens, I will protect your mouth, which blossoms into, this might be the very most fun day ever. And I don't think there's any question about it. And I wish we could keep riding together just like this until the end of time. And then I'm going to flash forward all the way to the end. In the 4 months since I've returned, and the only other thing you need to know is that I have made an offer on Oski to his owner, and he said nothing, which is very Icelandic of him. In the 4 months since I've returned from Iceland, I've lost one friend and 3 acquaintances to suicide. Several of my women friends are on high alert because in the face of this administration's war against women, their daughters have become suicidal. Suicide has risen exponentially among LGBTQIA+ and trans youth since public hatred toward them has been re-legitimized. Native Americans continue to have the highest suicide rate in the nation, a direct result of 500 years of erasure and genocide. And suicide rates for Black youth spiked in 2025 as those in power made racist rhetoric great again. An organization I follow called JED informs me on a daily basis that 1 in 10 high school students tried to take their life this year. 1 in 10. On the positive side, several of my friends who work in equine therapy are seeing deep and beautiful relationships form between their young clients and their horses. Here in the US, formerly wild Mustangs in particular are providing sensitive and useful mirrors to deeply troubled teens. I've ridden a friend's rescued Mustang named Birdie on several occasions, and she is simultaneously half wild and sensible, the closest thing to an Icelandic I have met at home. I'm at an age that makes suicidal thoughts feel pretty redundant. But the despair and moral shame I carry watching the daily harm those who have stolen their way to power in my country are enacting on children and wolves, on our allies and the earth, sends me as low some days as I have ever been. Animals are here to help us live. I am absolutely certain of it. Not to the exclusion of being their beautiful, brilliant, wild, and sentient selves, but because of it. Horses know, without even having to think about it, the deep connection and mutual horses know without even having to think about it, that deep connection and mutual care fill our tanks rather than deplete them. Generosity is its own reward, someone said a long time ago, not only because of some karmic equation, but because it is in the moment of giving that we are the most full. All animals know this and would share that knowledge and so much more with us freely if only we would stop exterminating them. I would love to die while riding an Icelandic horse in full stride on a beach or on an endless sheep trail in the highlands, but I would love even more to live in that condition for at least a little while longer. And if I organize my working life just right into semi-retirement, it's possible that I can. Nearly 6 weeks after I arrived home from Iceland, I got the following email from Rudmar. Hi, Pam. Nice to hear that you liked the tours this summer and also our horses. I thought it would be very appropriate that you got Salka for the beach ride. I'm glad that people usually like my Oski. I can't keep all my horses. Some have to go further. Oski is better suited to 1 or 2 owners instead of being in my business. So yes, he is for sale. Most important is that Oski will have a good home and in good hands, and I know he is in very good hands with you. The price of the horse is... You look into the matter and let me know what you want to do. Best regards, Rudmar. I have read that email 1,000 times, and still it gives me goosebumps. Now Oski is officially mine, and still living with several hundred of his friends on Eldhestar's winter pastures. He's been on vacation since the end of a hard-working summer. Anna has sent me photos that prove he is round and fuzzy, just as he should be at this time of year. In a few weeks, I will return to Iceland to see him, and it will become real to me that we belong to each other now. I will take lessons on him and ride out with him, and I will take him on long tour next summer. I will continue to work toward permanent residency while also appreciating time with my 3 retired equine gentlemen here in Colorado. The US will find its way out of the mess we're in, or we won't. And I'll track and suffer every moment of that struggle. But a horse will not make a suicide. I know this to be true. Not his own, and not mine either. So I'll keep reaching for the reins and throwing myself up into the saddle with every bit of life I have left.
Thank you, Pam.
One of
Thank you,
my,
Annette. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Betsy.
yeah, and thank you all. Thank you for joining us. As someone who has read all four of these books, my God, do you have some great reading ahead. But even better, the conversations that they will spark, and the people that you'll get to hand them to the moment you're finished. Because these are the kinds of stories that make evangelists of us all. And what a way to close. Thank you. Pam, Annette, Eli, Betsy, thanks for spending part of your Sunday evening with us. Thank you to the remarkable number of people who chose to do the same. And for all of you who are readers and donors and supporters and friends of these artists and of Torrey House Press, we literally couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for being here with us. Have a marvelous night, and go hug a creature, animal or otherwise. Here's to community, and here's to all of you. Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.